Greetings and welcome to the channel. This is Mikhailov from Team Retro, where we like retro games and the devices that bring them to us. 2024 has been the year of inexpensive Anbernic devices, and here we are with yet another handheld in the XX line. This is the Anbernic RGCubeXX. This handheld looks almost exactly like this one, but it functions like this one, and this one, and this one. So why? What makes this iteration worthwhile? With that in mind, we're going to put this device through its paces and find out if it's worth your hard-earned dollar bucks. So let's dive in and get to work. At time of recording, the Anbernic RGCubeXX pre-orders have not gone live yet. This handheld is slated to go live Tuesday, October 22nd at 3 a.m. Pacific Time, 6 a.m. Eastern Time. By time you are watching this video, sales should be live and you could purchase this handheld for about $60. The unit that I'm using in this video is a gray model sent to me by Anbernic for the purposes of this review. As is always required, all opinions are my own, I'm not getting paid, and they are not seeing this video before it is published. It's time to hop onto our mount and ride into Spec Town. The CubeXX is powered by an H700 quad-core ARM Cortex-A53 processor. The GPU is a dual-core G31 MP2. The device has 1 GB of LPDDR4 RAM and dual SD cards for operating system and storage. The screen is a 3.95-inch IPS screen with OCA lamination and a 720 by 720 resolution. Giving the device life is a 3800 mAh battery. For connectivity, this handheld has Wi-Fi built in as well as Bluetooth 4.2. The device ships with a Linux 64-bit operating system. The beauty of Anbernic is their predictability, and the unboxing experience is a perfect example of the company streamlining their process. Unboxing the CubeXX is very similar to unboxing any other Anbernic handheld in the XX line, right down to the design of the box. Inside the box is the unit itself, a user manual, and a USB-C charging cable. Alright, so let's get into our device tour here. So we're going to start, as we usually do, with the top buttons. Now, these L1, L2, R1, R2 are very different from that of the RG Cube. They are just strict analog. They're kind of muffled, though. They're not too bad sound-wise. Usually when you get these analog, either 1 or 0, on or off kind of triggers, you don't normally get them subdued like this. They're normally very clicky, but let's go ahead and let's do our sound test. Listen to how muffled that L1 is. R2 is a little clickier. Now let's do R1 and R2. Again, oddly subdued bumpers, but noisier triggers. Up top, you've got your power button, you've got your volume rocker, you've got USB-C for charging, you've got your reset button, and you have HDMI mini for HDMI out to a television or a monitor. Same as with the RG Cube, you've got no I/O on the sides. So let's go ahead and take a look at the front. And one big difference you're going to notice is that the D-pad is on the top. It is a Genesis-style circle D-pad. Let's go ahead and take a look at how this sounds. It's not too bad. I'm a big fan of circle D-pads, and this one sure seems to be decent. First impressions seems to be okay. The joysticks are your typical Switch style joysticks. They are placed on the bottom this time. They still have LEDs around them though, and you know how I feel about LEDs on these more budget devices, but yet again, here they are, front and center. The buttons, they're not bad. They are not quite flush with the unit when depressed, which is a good thing. They do seem to be an okay size. And I have the DMG model, so you could tell this is colored and modeled very similarly to that of an old school Game Boy. Start and select on the right here, and you've got a menu button that is typical of these XX devices. And on the RG Cube, this is where your Android function buttons would have been. On the bottom, you have downward facing speakers, you have a 3.5mm headphone jack, and you have your dual SD card setup. And then on the back, you have a nice grippy texture here. Actually makes this quite nice to hold, and very similarly to the RG Cube, you'll also notice the lack of active cooling here because this is a lower powered chip, so there really isn't any need to have any type of active cooling or exhaust on the back or on the top. This is going to be a relatively low powered unit. And then of course you have your 1:1 aspect ratio screen here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn this unit on. You're going to get your typical Anbernic logo. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to note with this specific version of the XX line. And that is not only the change in the way the stock firmware looks, it's actually a lot more sleek here, but also, one of the things I really didn't like about this stock software is the really annoying sound effect that would play. And this seems to have kind of changed that sound effect to something a little bit more palatable. So I'm gonna put this here right next to the mic so you could see this is the stock firmware, and I'm just gonna move things around a little bit. That is a much more palatable sound than the really, really annoying beep that was with the past versions of this stock firmware. And I'm actually really glad that Anbernic changed that. Let's go ahead and look at something that they didn't change, these bright rainbow LEDs. So let's go ahead and see if we can't go into the settings. And right here, perfect. You can set the backlit brightness. Let's turn that down a little bit so that you can see the screen a little bit better, so you can change the brightness on the fly. And if you go down here to LED settings, you can actually disable the lighting effect entirely, or you could do an always mode, which will just have one specific color. And then you can change that color as needed. I kind of want to go with a... I wish there was an easier way to change this. I kind of want to just go with a straight red color. Or you can also do a combination, but yeah, these are changeable. And this is in other XX devices as well, but I kind of wish that they would stop putting these LEDs in these devices and take that money and give us something else instead. That's not bad. We'll go with this bright red here. And then another thing is that you can also turn down the brightness of the LEDs. So even though I'm not a fan of these LEDs, the fact that you could turn them off, the fact that you can actually change them, it's a little bit different from what we've had in the past. And you know what? Good on Anbernic. It shows that they're listening. And so now we've got these a little bit more subdued, and we got them as a color I like. And yeah, I guess it's all right. But although, take a look at this. The lower the brightness gets, you also have parts here that are just kind of not lit. And that's really weird. That's really bizarre. I don't know what to do with that. I guess I could turn the brightness up a little bit more, but man, Anbernic, just stop putting LEDs in these things. All right, so I want to actually take the RGCubeXX and I want to compare it to the OG RG Cube. And this is a handheld that I really do enjoy for dual screen and Tate mode gaming. But this is an Android-based handheld, and this is going to be more of a Linux-based handheld. This obviously has a stronger chip than this one, but this one has the D-pad on top, whereas this one has the D-pad on the bottom. And the D-pads, they look similar, but they do feel different. I don't really know how else to explain that other than just kind of like pivot both of these D-pads and notice that this one is clickier and has a little bit less travel than this one. And obviously the joysticks are different and they're also placed different. These are your typical Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons. These are, I believe, Hall sensing, and these still have that cardinal snapping issue. I believe that that's going to be the case with these as well. Some people like that, some people don't. But I did want to make some more direct comparisons. Whereas here we have more travel on the triggers, and here we just have that very clicky trigger. As far as D-pad centric content, I never really felt like this was out of place being down here, and I have had handhelds in the past where this was an obvious concern. This one was never one of those. Like, obviously it's more comfortable to grab it up here, but I've always felt like this was okay. But definitely having it up here is a much more ergonomic decision, and you could clearly tell that this is a handheld meant to play up to NDS. This is not a handheld really meant for joystick-centric games, and we're going to have to test out NDS gameplay in a little bit. Obviously, this one running Android is going to be more expensive than this one. They also moved the locations of the SD card, whereas on the RG Cube it's up here, and it's down here on the CubeXX. The OG Cube also has the headphone jack up top and USB-C up top. Now the RG Cube also has exhaust up here, so all of these decisions to move all these ports and these switches probably have to do with the fact that they did not have to make room for a heatsink or fans or any type of exhaust because you have passive cooling as opposed to active cooling on the RG Cube to account for the Android operating system. Other than that, there are a lot of differences to these two devices, but you can tell that one was heavily influenced by the other, and this does look like the budget model of this. Now let's do some other comparisons to some other one-to-one devices, starting with the handheld that started it all, the Powkiddy RGB30. Surprisingly, this handheld is currently $10 more than the CubeXX, but I would argue the CubeXX is the better handheld due to the ergonomics alone. However, the RGB30 is lighter and slightly more pocketable. It also has front-facing speakers as opposed to downward-facing ones. Now, if the Android version of the RG Cube at $199 is too expensive, and the CubeXX at $60 is not what you want because you prefer Android, then a decent in-between is the ZPG A1 Unicorn. It doesn't have the build quality of the Cube, but it does run Android and it has front-facing speakers. I also like that this handheld feels lightweight, and as long as you're not running heavy games, it's a very fun handheld. It's not as premium as the OG Cube, and unfortunately, this handheld is supposed to retail for about $130, but the pricing and availability on AliExpress has gone up for some reason, and you're currently looking at a starting price of $160. Honestly, wait for sales on this one or use coupon codes if you have them. The Retro Handhelds website runs weekly deals that frequently have these coupon codes available. Now, for those of you who don't know about the XX line, this chipset is lower powered and really designed for systems PlayStation 1 and under. The real appeal to running a one-to-one screen is for dual screen games like Nintendo DS, as well as Tate mode arcade games and Pico 8 games. Let's focus on these systems for gameplay testing. Now, I do not recommend using the default game menu unless you're okay being locked into those specific experiences, including overlays and shader selection. For those who just want a simplified menu and an out-of-the-box experience, then yeah, definitely go for it. But if you want to customize how you want these games to look, you will need to do so in RetroArch by launching your games from the RA game menu. Even these experiences are hardly customized out of the box. You will have to manually change these settings yourself. So let's look at Game Boy, for example. It does look decent here with integer scaling, a nice overlay, and some shaders preserving the original color, but those shaders don't really leave much room for customization outside of what they're trying to give you. So if you want to change the colorization and remove integer scaling, you're going to have to manually go in and remove these shaders or turn shaders off entirely. These are most likely all changes and optimizations that custom firmware will bring to the table, but for now, we have to configure all of this manually. Once into a game, it becomes very apparent that this D-pad on top is a good thing, and that this handheld is clearly meant for D-pad-centric games. Unfortunately, I did struggle to do combos in fighting games like Street Fighter, but I also found that this D-pad also passed the Contra test. So it's kind of a mixed bag. In some situations, it works really well, but in other situations, it doesn't work well at all. So if you're going to use this handheld for fighting games, it might not be a good fit for you. Now, if we move on to a Tate mode game, this is another example where the D-pad is just fine. So let's take a look at the visual appearance here. I noticed that when booting these games using the default game menu, you would end up with a very subpar experience. The bezels are off and the game doesn't take up the screen like it should. However, when booting using the RA menu, things were definitely more improved, including the bezels on the side mimicking the arcade game you are playing. Nintendo DS emulation is a little weird, but it is functional. This OS is utilizing that awful, ancient version of Jurassic that I hate so much with its tiny text, but at least it's serviceable. However, I could see why people would want to spend an extra $100 to get the OG Cube just so you can at least get the Android version of Jurassic running and have a better DS experience as well as having a touchscreen. You'll need a magnifying glass, but you could turn on high definition 3D resolution in the video settings. Doing that will give you a crisper picture with less pixelation, and you can use built-in shortcuts to swap screens or switch to a single screen or dual screen. However, there isn't an option to scale to the top screen, so if you need to see both screens, you're left with a very hard-to-see experience. So even for DS games, I would recommend games that you only need one screen for. And finally, there is no Splore support in Pico 8, and you have to make sure that you put P8 files instead of PNG files in the appropriate ROMs folder. So it's not the most plug and play, but you can make it work, and of course, this handheld screen is designed with these Pico 8 games in mind. I just wish there was a way to get Splore support on here, hopefully soon with custom firmware. Now let's wrap things up with my final thoughts. It's nice to see another one-to-one device that isn't an Android, a Powkiddy, or a cheap clone, and the fact that this handheld is under $100, as well as $10 cheaper than the RGB30 at time of recording, is a definite plus in favor of the CubeXX. The ergonomics are also better than the RGB30 with those ergonomic bumps, and I complain about the default game menu because I like to customize my experience, but I really shouldn't complain that much because I can customize that experience in the RA game menu. So in a way, it really is kind of the best of both worlds. If you want just plug and play and don't care what the experience looks like visually, then boot your games from the game menu. If you want to customize, then boot your games from the RA game menu. Of course, no device is perfect, so let's talk about the negatives. Well, the D-pad got me through most of my testing just fine. It didn't do well with fighting games. I imagine the best use case for this handheld will be RPGs like Pokemon ROM hacks and the like, once custom firmware can work out some of the kinks with DS emulation. Because right now, with the stock firmware, DS emulation is okay, but it's not enough to make me want to pick this up over the original RG Cube. And finally, I've said it in my other XX handheld reviews, but do we really need LEDs around these joysticks? Please let me know if the comments if this is just a me problem, but I still feel like these handhelds don't really need it, and as you saw in my footage earlier, they're not the best LEDs anyway. I guess I can just stop complaining and just turn them off. So another month down, and another XX device by Anbernic. I think this handheld has a lot of potential to be a star budget one-to-one screen device, but we have to give the custom firmware devs more time to cook to further optimize this experience. And since pre-orders are just starting, if you decide to buy this device, hopefully by the time it does actually hit your doorstep, there will be some custom firmware available. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Is this a device you are considering, and what do you think is the best use case for a device like this? And please feel free to continue the conversation in the Retro Handhelds and the Steam Machine Discords, where you could find me hanging out in between videos. And if you want to support the show like these wonderful people on the screen, you could do so by going to my Patreon page. Links for all these places are in the description. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and please be sure to like and subscribe if this video was helpful to you in any way. Every smash of that button helps the channel grow and allows me to get more content out to you. But until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.